Welcome to the Markets Happy Hour podcast, a weekly markets update for investors the world over. Each week we discuss inflation, geopolitics, interest rates, equity markets, and other asset classes. To try to answer the question, what does this mean for my investment portfolio? Let's dive in.
So a number of observations. The first is that averages lie. We think of inflation as one number. We measure CPI, we measure PPI in different countries. We talk about core versus non, but inflation is a basket of a bunch of underlying prices. Energy prices are particularly volatile. Cost of housing is volatile. And so as we discovered when we had 9% inflation coming out of COVID in the US and higher in some other countries, inflation falls differentially by individual depending on your consumption basket. Do you commute to work? How do you commute to work? What do you have kids in school? Just every family is different, and every business is different, and every country is different in terms of their import basket, their consumption basket. And so higher inflation falls differentially. Low inflation is less of an issue. That's one observation. The second is that energy demand, you had the chart up about electricity prices. ChatGPT became available to the general public in November 2022. And that and sort of the general AI digital revolution and the thought of what AI is going to do to transform our economy, that has doubled expected energy consumption by 2030 versus pre-22 forecasts. That's a huge change in our collective expectations for the energy we're going to consume as a society. And we're a couple years into that, and electricity prices are moving up. We also have not had a peace settlement in Ukraine or a peace settlement in the Middle East that includes a cessation of sanctions against the Iranian oil sector. And so oil prices remain elevated relative to prior to the Russian invasion and prior to the Gaza conflict, where oil prices are down year to date, but we're still above $60 a barrel, whereas pre-invasion we were at 40 and historically in the 20 to 40 range. So energy prices are elevated, but energy demand is going up quickly. So we have these inflationary waves. You also mentioned tariffs. I think the tariffs themselves are increasing prices in the US and are a deflationary force for the rest of the world. These are US tariffs by and large. And so monetary authorities in the rest of the world have the ability to ease policy because inflationary pressures are lower due to the US tariffs. The Fed is actually fighting a war on two fronts with the dual mandate and paying more attention to what's happening with employment and the economy, kind of trying to thread the needle and so unable to get inflation down to its 2% target because of now keeping an eye on more explicitly what's happening with strength in the labor market. So the Fed's fighting on two fronts, whereas monetary authorities in the rest of the world could further relax monetary conditions if they thought they needed to. So again, inflation falling differentially in the US and the rest. I think what gets ignored in the tariff discussion sometimes is the uncertainty shock. So the Liberation Day announcements froze some corporate buying activities, some consumer buying activity, and then we had another uncertainty shock in the last 45 days with the US government being closed for longer than was expected. And hopefully we'll get a vote to reopen and get reopened by Wednesday or so, or at least have certainty on reopening. But that uncertainty shock again has caused consumers to defer purchases, not just government employees who weren't getting paid, but consumers have deferred purchases, and that creates a supply shock that actually feeds through into inflation. So those uncertainty shocks, I think, are important as at least transitory inflation drivers.
When it comes to the vibe check on the economy.